Okay. Where should we start, boys? We're going to talk today about how agents get paid.
Agents. Well, isn't that by closing deals?
Yeah, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know.
No, we've closed.
I've been doing great.
But no, but it's a great question, because sometimes it's like, well, yeah, how do you get, you know, I'll have buyers tell me like, well, what do I pay? Do you take credit card?
What
does
Venmo?
that look like? Yeah, Venmo request.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this lawsuit that has brought a lot of this stuff up to the forefront. Yeah. Of conversation in our industry, and kind of if there are changes coming, what they might be. We're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. So, Jeff.
Yeah, we want to keep it high level. We're not going to like dive into the intricacies of the lawsuit. There's so many different arguments being made both directions. But yeah, we're going to talk about what we feel the solution, kind of like the answer is to it, and why it's been done this way for a long time. And we'll play devil's advocate on both sides. I think people will enjoy this conversation.
Should we start with the lawsuit and just say what it was about?
Yeah,
and then that'll get us into what.
Why don't you summarize the lawsuit?
Okay, so here it is. The lawsuits, there's a couple of them in particular, claim that NAR rules, National Association of Realtors, violate antitrust laws and inflate the fees paid to the buyer's agent by requiring a listing agent to compensate a buyer's agent for listing a property on the MLS. Now that sentence is just inaccurate, actually, like how that's not actually what happens, but yeah, you get the gist of it. So NAR, the National Association of Realtors, argues that the lawsuits misrepresent association rules as anti-competitive. Okay. So that's what the whole beef was about. We won't get into like all the intricacies. It's going to get challenged in court and disputed, and it's going to last for years probably.
So let's start with like listing a house, right?
Yeah.
So we sit down, we're talking to a client, and I'll say, okay, look, this is what I charge for my fees. And as part of this, we cooperate with a buyer's agent, and you get to decide what you want to pay the buyer's agent. And then we go through, if you offer a little bit, then there's a little bit less maybe motivation for the buyer's agent to make the sale, although that's not supposed to be the case, but they're supposed to represent their client for any house. Or if you offer a little bit more, maybe there's some more motivation, right? So it's really kind of, as you and I discussed, maybe kind of marketing or whatever. But ultimately, when we list houses, we give that opportunity to the seller to decide what they want to cooperate with the buyer's agent between the two brokerages.
So what amount is it? Like, where do you start? How do you have that conversation?
Yeah. So let's just say, for example, I say, hey, I'm charging 3% for my fees. Okay. That includes everything from photography, handling the escrow process, putting the listing online, you know, walking them through the request for repairs, helping negotiate, all that, right? So that's 3%. And then the conversation with them is, okay, so do you want to offer 3% to the buyer's agent? Do you want to offer between 2 to 3? And I always suggest that they offer at least 2.5% is my suggestion, because it's a lot of work to get a buyer into a house. Some of these buyers people have been working with for over a year, and you know, there's a lot of showings, time and energy, right? And then they go, yeah, this is what I feel like that's a fair number to offer on this, you know, for this house. And then maybe they go, no, I want to offer less. And ultimately they have the decision, but we just talk about the value of having, you know, buyer's agents wanting to show and take their clients to the house and get into contract.
So overall, the fee is 5 to 6% total, usually split 50-50 between the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, though, is a little bit of a caveat, but that fee doesn't go to the agent. That goes to the brokerages.
Yes.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So the brokerage has a split with their agents. The brokerage has to cover, you know, they're covering insurance for the brokerage. They're covering errors and omissions, you know, the marketing costs of the brokerage, the overhead and operations. So there's a good chunk of that money goes to the brokerage, and then the rest of it goes to the agent.
The brokerage being Keller Williams, Remax, you know,
whatever
EXP,
brokerage.
Whatever brokerage it is. Okay.
Yep.
And then the agent gets paid off of that, and there's usually splits with you're on teams and everything like that. So the money gets kind of cut in different ways depending on the situation, right?
A million different ways it could work out.
Exactly. Okay, so 5 to 6%, half usually to the buyer's agent, half to the listing agent. That money all gets split between brokerages and agents and teams and all that kind of stuff, right? Transaction coordinators, photographers, all that kind of stuff. All the marketing efforts get looped into all. That's how everyone gets paid. It's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff you don't think about.
Yeah. So that comes out of the proceeds of the home when it's sold.
Yeah.
So why? This is one of the questions is why is that on the seller to pay?
Great question. Adam, I'm gonna let you chime in here because we were having a conversation on this earlier, but why does it work better for the seller, in our opinion, than for the buyer?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, let's just play devil's advocate. Like, yes, historically, that's the way it's been. Well, like, we are talking today, like, well, why is that? Like, let's just push back on it. And because what they're proposing is that, okay, the seller just covers the listing agent fee, and then the buyers pay their buyer's agent the fee for representing them on the buy side. But why for the seller? Again, the seller is selling their house, and they, typically when you sell anything, if you have someone sell a car for you, you're going to pay a commission for that. Okay. And you're just like, hey, just take care of it. I want to make sure that you just tell me where I need to sign, what's the process, and I want it to be done. Within a house, there's a lot of work that goes into that. You need to match a buyer. It's a really big decision. For a lot of people, one of the biggest purchases they'll ever make. So again, historically, it's made sense. On the seller side, they're going to go ahead and take the proceeds from selling the house to have this be a successful transaction. If you start to divide it up, what we kind of run into is that now the buyer, let's say you take a first-time home buyer, that's going to increase their expenses already in buying a house. Could really slow down the ability for a buyer to even qualify for a house.
Yeah.
Now, who's going to go ahead and pay for that? The seller is the one who has to sell their house. So they're actually going to go ahead and lose if they have less buyers that they can choose from to be able to sell their house. So, the argument is within this court case is that, well, maybe it'll reduce the inflation that's been happening with house prices. But here's the thing, we are likening it to, let's say, in the car manufacturers, there's a credit from the state on electric vehicles. As soon as those credits come out from the state, let's say it's $7,000, the price of the car goes up $7,000.
Right.
The seller's not necessarily just going to give away that extra 2.5% and say, I'll, discount it. They might, but again, it's really worked well because the seller's like, hey, I need to sell this house. I'm going to go ahead and pay to market that house, have someone successfully do that. And right now that's about 5 to 6% in our area.
Yeah. And thinking of it as a buyer, let's say we are the buyer, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you need to come up with an extra, let's say it's a $1 million purchase. You need to come up with an extra $25,000 to pay your agent, your buyer's agent. And that's going to, where's that going to come out? That's going to come out of like your down payment, or you have to save extra $25,000, right? Where for the seller, it's really easy. The seller's like, hey, I just got a check for $700,000. So it's coming out of my proceeds. It's very easy. For the buyer, it's a much bigger stone to get over, or, kind of hindrance than it is for the seller.
Yeah, especially if you can't finance that, as part of your big purchase. When you're buying a home, you can finance most of that, in addition to what your down payment's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm curious what other options you guys might, well, let me start by asking this. Do you see change happening? And if so, when?
Kind of what I see is what always happens is there'll be another disclosure, and I'll be like, hey, seller, you have the option of not offering, which has always been the case, actually, anything to the buyer's agent. You could offer zero. It's just going to be a lot less attractive for buyer's agents to show your property, or they're going to have a contract with their buyer for the amount that's going to get paid. So there's going to probably be an extra disclosure, extra paragraph. California, honestly, when I look at this, and this hasn't come to California yet, the lawsuits haven't, it's pretty clear. It's very clear, I would say, in the contract that it's a cooperating broker and that it's a different amount. There's, it's not all bundled into one, and it doesn't say it's divided by two. It's totally a conversation that happens with the seller. So maybe California doesn't even have to change anything. But the rest of the nation, if they have contracts that don't explain that or clearly identify that, then there's probably gonna be some changes there. I also think that you're gonna see a lot more upfront conversations that need to happen with buyers. We already do this, but it's like, hey, look, like there's a new thing where the seller may or may not pay, for me to work for you. And this is what I charge, and this is what I do. And then it comes to value. It's like, and that's one of the things that we always discuss with our clients anyways. Like, hey, this is the value that you're getting out of working with me. And the market for years and years and years has demonstrated that where you provide value for someone, it's worth them paying to have representation by a buyer's agent. That has not gone away. I don't think it will ever go away. I think you know, having someone in the field that understands how to navigate the complexity of real estate is so important. So you're going to see some I would say minor shifts, and then maybe just a little bit clearer in the industry, you know, for agents to provide that upfront conversation and have actually a buyer representation agreement signed, which is something we have done in the past. And, you know, it's like, hey, we might have to start doing this a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as much as technology changes and, you know, creates efficiencies, and I'm curious if you guys could think back to the last year's transactions when you were the listing agent and you had a buyer's agent. It just, so much of this negotiating and all this is as much an art as it is a science. And man, just thinking about the buyer's agents that I've worked with, I'm just so thankful for them. They earn the money. I know we do when we're representing buyers. I know technology will create efficiencies, and I'm here for it. Yep. But there's something about like knowing the local market, navigating the intricacies of personalities and contracts and all that stuff. There's just so much nuance. I'm trying to think of how it could change, and I think it's going to be really tough. And there's always people kind of on the edges trying to do this without agents, and more power to them, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I just think it's going to be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, well, Adam loves numbers, right? And so when you look at the numbers nationwide, and I don't have the exact figures, but we know for a fact that people sell their houses without representation get less.
Yeah.
And that basically more than pays for itself, right?
Yeah.
And then why is that? Well, one, they don't know how to market the property, but two, people get so emotional, right? So computers will never eliminate the emotional buffering that takes place in a transaction that real estate agents do.
Yeah.
It can't.
Yeah.
And so there is a finesse and a skill to helping someone come to a win-win agreement. And when you have two calm, collected professionals working on each side of the transaction, that is of great value.
Yeah.
And they're protecting their client, but they're also saying, hey, like ultimately you want a house, Mr. Buyer. You want to get into a house for your family and make well, I'm telling you right now that no house 25 years old is going to be in perfect condition, right? And these are the things that we see that we do day in and day out that are kind of a bigger deal. And this is what you want to have negotiated. And you bring them into alignment with the realities of the condition of the house and everything else, and help them walk through kind of that like up and down emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
And Adam, you're fantastic at this. You've done this so many times in the last couple of years. It's like, I can think of the last few transactions. There are some serious, like it would not have happened with an AI.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, you might have a large request for repair, or, and that you're able to win for your client. And it can be, like Jeff's saying, a true win-win for both sides. This is not just one side, oh my gosh, they won, and the other side is just like the loser and they're hurting.
Right.
But it actually can keep the deal together and be a much bigger amount than 5% of the total transaction. Again, we'll go out and buy something, again, 20% off, and it's like, a big deal. We're talking 5%. Now, it is the biggest purchase for most people, so it's a lot of money. There is a lot of money on the line, but we've got stories of some clients where they're like, trying to do an off-market deal, which is totally possible. And it's like, more power to you. We help people, give them, advice as much as we can from the outside. Anyway, we could just add value. But, I had a friend client who was like, hey, the guy just sent me a Word document, and it's like, you're going to buy, multi-million-dollar house. And he's like, I can't sleep at night. Like, I'm stressing about this. And
totally.
There's just a lot that can go
At least put it
wrong.
on a cocktail napkin.
Yeah.
That seems way more.
At least it's a better
legit.
story.
Yeah, better story.
Out of your mom's basement. So that's the thing. It's like, there's just a lot. It can be done. We see people for sale by owner, totally can be done. But really, when you're looking at a house of the, average value around here, $1.2 million, it's like, that's a lot of money on, within the 5 cities area on the Central Coast. And we just don't want too much just at chance or on hope that, hey, your word's going to be good on this. And so we hope the value's there, but I would like to kind of throw around a couple ideas, like some things we've talked about is, what do you guys think about even going to like a fixed fee? You ever see it going that route? Because let's take, 2.5% on a $2 million house or 2.5% on a $575,000 house. sometimes it's a lot of work. Sometimes like a mobile home could be even more work
Yeah.
than a
Yep.
regular transaction.
Yeah.
I love
Yes,
mobile
they
homes.
can.
So
We
what
just
do
did
you
one.
guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for fixed fee. I think we've seen, kind of discount brokerages go that direction. A lot of times people discount the network, the honestly what we spend tons of time, money, investment to create. So for us, it's like, hey, we probably won't go to fixed fee because of the network we've developed of people that want to buy and sell, right?
Well, I kind of think of it too like a sports agent. When they're negotiating contracts, if they're on a percentage basis, they're incented to get as much as they can for their client. And that's kind of like what we are too when we are representing a seller. It's like, man, we want to get you as much as we want to be realistic. And I think that's more the conversation than not. But we do want to maximize your return, right?
Well, and we want referrals.
Yeah.
Right. So working with a buyer, people are always like, well, there's this disincentive because you're on a percentage to negotiate the price down. No, that's not true. We're trying to we're thinking about 5 deals, ahead, like the referral. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like we want to win big for our clients every time. Now, not everybody's in the same kind of perspective, but I do think it's like travel agents or anything, right? There's some travel agencies that still exist and doing amazing. You will always have disruptors in industries that push out the weak, and then the strong survive and they get better and they add more value. So it always comes to that conversation of value. There will be and will always be discount brokers, and dealing with them, discount brokers, is a pain in the butt. They don't care that much. They're not invested. They're not thinking about the referral. All they're thinking about is getting this deal done and getting the next discount transaction. They're not thinking about the person's life, what's best for them. They're discounting to be of any value. Now, having value and offering that, people don't. I mean, I have never had actually a client complain at the end of the transaction about how much they paid me. They see it, they sign, right? And they never call me, Jeff, I can't believe you're charging me this amount. They're like, thank you so much. That was amazing. I appreciate you so much. So it comes to value. And so I do think, Adam, that what you're saying about the fixed fee, I think that's where you will see kind of buyer's agents go that are not confident in the value that they add to their clients.
Yeah. That's really good.
What else you got?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing too is we've thought of is some other industries. Let's say that you have a lawyer, they're going to charge you by the hour.
Yeah.
It's another interesting thing. What do you guys think about perhaps even being charged by the hour? Because we'll have some where we'll show buyers, it's like, hey, free of charge. We could show people 30 houses and they could end up at the end and go, you know what? I'm not in the market to buy right now. And that's it. Yeah. We all
Too
have stories
soon.
of that.
Too soon.
I actually don't mind that model. I think it could be a cool model. The way I would do it is some kind of hourly fee. And then as we go, and this would all be negotiated on the buyer's contract.
Yeah.
But then as we go into contract, this is the fee to handle the escrow.
Yeah.
So it's here's an hourly people. The problem with doing that is people a lot of times don't know what they want. And if they're like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay let's say $200 to go see 3 houses, they might be less
more hesitant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I want to show not an insane amount of homes, but I want to go into homes where they're not quite sure, because at least it says this definitely is not the thing for me. And I think that's just as much a win as finding the right house for people, especially when they're kind of early on and you got to go through homes, and it can't always be just open houses. You've got to schedule showings. And so I would hate to disincentivize buyers to going into more homes to try to understand. So, but sometimes honestly, it would be really nice to get paid hourly because you're just putting in so much.
You could be running around the county. We live in a big county.
Yeah, and then if it turns out and this is the other thing, this is a high risk, high reward job. I mean, kind of put it out on the line. I know a lot of us burned the ships behind us and went for this, and it's tough, at times. And I know people probably think of agents like they do lawyers sometimes, like a necessary evil, but that's where I think we want to change that narrative. And I've had the same experience, Jeff, where after the end of the transaction, they're like, they know how much they paid you, and they're like, we would have paid you more.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
Yep.
Is the value was there, you know? So anyway, Yeah, I also kind of wonder, this might not be super applicable, but, you know, especially because of the kind of market we're in, we're just seeing so many agents leave the business. It's interesting that this is an industry where there are so many agents who do 1, 2, 3 deals a year. And
A lot.
when we looked at the data a few years ago, it was like most of the transactions in SLO County, like the top of the food chain in terms of like the best of the best agents, they were like what, 2, 3% of market share.
Yeah, and that's painful. I mean, it's even more than I think, maybe, right?
Yeah, it could be.
So I think
so many transactions are done by like
part-timers.
friends and family, part-timers. Yeah. And I wonder how all this compensation conversation is going to change that.
Yeah, I think the barrier to entry to being a real estate agent is too low.
Yes.
And then I think the staying in the business, like, requirements are low as well. So it's like, hey, if Jeff wants to stay in the business year to year, he needs to demonstrate to the DRE that he's got the knowledge.
Department of Real Estate.
Yeah, the Department of Real Estate, that he's out there working and he's doing it. I think, honestly, part-timers, when I get a part-timer on a transaction on the other side, I'm like, great, here we go. I'm going to have to hold their hand through the transaction.
It's a lot of work on our end. Yeah.
It's a lot of work on our end. Not against part-timers, but I think that in this industry, some people just see it as a paycheck for doing one extra transaction. And like, that is not good for our industry.
Well, I just talked to somebody who was like, hey, I think I'm going to get my real estate license just so I can do my family's business. I was like, I mean, whatever, but
when I first got my license and I wasn't in the industry full time, I still hired a professional real estate agent that was doing it full time because I knew he would give me more money and know how to navigate the transaction better than myself.
Yeah.
And it's and like people, you know, then when you become full time, you make that jump. And like, honestly, like, and people don't understand this. Like, my first transactions, my contract to get paid was 10%, like, of what the brokerage got, right? So $1,000 maybe on a good day. And I had to pay to learn how to do real estate. These other shops, you know, like, they're not paying that amount and they're kind of on their own, and you're doing it part-time and you kind of forgot, and you don't have someone keeping you up to date with the most recent laws and the disclosures. Like, you are not doing anybody any favors.
I do really like your idea of making the barrier to entry more difficult. Not that it wasn't stressful getting in, but really when you think about it, you got to pass a test that's, and then all of a sudden you can practice real estate law.
It's crazy.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's not great. I think there's
apprentices, apprenticeships.
Yeah, there's got to be some way of doing it.
And the courses that you take are great. You're learning about fair housing, you're learning about all these things, but like the hands-on experience, you have to be under. I mean,
learn by doing.
Yeah, you should not be learned by doing on someone's largest transaction.
No,
it's like, this is not okay.
No,
under a mentor for at least a few years. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's really, you know, crucial. And you know, Jeff, to your point earlier, I think a takeaway for any agent out there, and honestly, any client who's going to potentially buy or sell, is know the value of what you're getting. Like, have that conversation on the front end. Just ask. Don't assume, and don't feel bad if you're like, I'm not really sure. Like, I was just talking with some first-time home buyers this week of like, I told him, I was like, hey, do you know how I would get paid as the buyer's agent? Let me just walk through that. Like, don't assume that people know. Set expectations ahead of time. Here's the value I'm going to provide, and here's how we get paid. Like, I do love that about real estate. It's more transparent. Like, if I buy a software, I don't know how much the salesperson's making on that. Like, you know, we market that. I think that's really great to be transparent about it, but make sure that we're really providing the value that people go, like you're saying, Jeff, is that at the end of the day, like, wow, I would have paid more. That's amazing. That's the type of business we want to be building here. Not something like, oh my gosh, I could have done that. Or I watched, you know, a couple episodes of House Hunters last night. Maybe I'll get my real estate license today.
I got this. Yeah.
I'll do it. Yeah.
She just opens that door and then it's check and cool.
Yeah. So 3 houses and they choose one every time, right? You know? So.
Great. I think it's a great conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's super helpful. And I like that our audience gets to kind of understand like what our thought process is. It'd be fun if people went onto our, you know, Instagram account or something. If we make like a post on this, when we post this out, just comment on it. Like, make a, like, yeah, no, I think that, you know, the hourly thing would work for me, you know, instead and paying you, you know, hourly or whatever. Like, I'd love to hear that. Like, it'd be interesting to get our audience's feedback.
Yeah, I think all in all, this is a good thing to get the conversation started. You know, I mean, just talk through options. Maybe there is a better solution that just hasn't been thought of yet. That's a win-win-win, you know, between sellers, buyers, and brokerages. So who knows? But yeah, thank you guys for the conversation. I think it's really good.
I like Jeff's idea. Like, if you have any ideas, like, you know, DM us on Instagram or something like that, to where we'd love to hear it. Because I think any industry that's been around for a while, real estate, there's a lot of archaic things in it. Like if we're not looking for opportunities to grow or change or improve, like we're missing a huge opportunity there. And so I think for us, we need to be willing to like play devil's advocate, look, push back, not initially get defensive, but go, oh, that's an interesting thought. How could we make that better? Where it's a win on both sides for agents and clients.
It's good, Adam.
Awesome. Hey, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one. See ya.
Sweet.